Who's wrong and who's wronger? In this corner, followed by millions, James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell. And in that corner, ignored by millions, Steve Dash Rinko Levers.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wrong and Wronger. You're looking down on Breakwell and up on Olivas. If that doesn't give you vertigo, give it a minute. We're about to start talking. But this is the podcast where we used to argue about things, and now we've decided to hug it out. And James, I'm sending you a big virtual hug via the interweb. How are you today?
I am cringing virtually to avoid that hug. Yeah, we used to argue about things, and now it's basically just, let's tell random stories about our life that nobody cares about. And see who's done something more pathetic. And you win that every time. Like, you couldn't win arguments with logic, but in terms of sheer misfortune, you're outperforming me. I gotta say, you've done very poorly at life, and it shows.
Well, I don't mean to brag, but if there's one thing I'm good at, it's at not being good at stuff. So I have my thing. What is the topic going to be this week, James? Keeping in mind that I do not have an original thought in my head, so this also piggybacks on your column.
I can't imagine how this intersects with my column, but okay. The topic is early jobs. Where do we...
Well, your column this week is about giving allowance to your kids for doing dishes, and that's usually for every kid their first job.
I thought you meant like actual real job that you pay taxes on and all of that.
Yes, I did mean that, but that is the linkage for me.
Your mind is a scary place, but let's roll with it. Let's see where this goes.
So early jobs, everyone trying to fight their way through middle school and high school, you need cash. And everybody gets early jobs. And when we set this up, James, I said, I don't know if you had an early job, but here's my idea for a topic. And you were offended by that statement.
I mean, if I'm currently employed, at some point I would have had to have had a first job, even if it were my current job. Like, it's impossible to be employed and not have a first job.
Well, yeah, but I don't think you got this one when you were 13. Obviously, it doesn't require the mental capacity of anyone above the age of 13, but I don't think you got it.
All right, well, let's start with you this week. Let's actually give you some time to talk on this podcast. You clearly have something in mind. What was your first job?
I don't have anything in mind, but I did have 2 and maybe 3 jobs that I paid taxes on. Ooh, I just thought of another one that I got fired from. Oh, no. Well, my first job was an allowance, and I got $1 a week, and I had to clean up dog poop, and there were many misadventures with that. One involved a snowblower and getting it up on the neighbor's roof and had it melt the next spring. I'll table that story for another day when we talk about dog poop. I'm sure that'll be one of our best topics given our history.
Yes.
But I also had to mow, but I got $1 a week doing that. And then I had a paper route, which used to be a thing. All of you youngsters watching the show, people used to, and by people I mean 12-year-old boys. Although I sold my route to a girl, 13-year-old girl. So girls did it too back then, but we had to load up these big bags with newspapers and on our bicycles take them around and put them in people's mailboxes or put them in their door. So I had that for a while, but my first 2 tax-paying jobs, I forgot about the one I got fired from. So I was a janitor at a grade school when I was 14. And I had keys and a run of the place. And I had to, like, mop the floors. And I don't remember. The floors was the biggest thing. I don't remember if I had any other duties, unless one popped up occasionally, but I didn't have the job long enough to hit any particular occasions. But the one thing I discovered that was my ultimate downfall, James, was I had access to the teacher's lounge and the cafeteria. And I don't know if when you were 14 you were hungry all the time, but access to free food was like a siren song drawing Odysseus into the rocks. So I would eat everything in the teacher's lounge, and they would have cake, they would have donuts, they would have cookies were another common theme. And then I'd go into the cafeteria and grab a handful of those little cartons of chocolate milk. I don't know if you remember those from your old grade school days, but it would be a feeding frenzy. And I can't remember having a conversation with the principal, but at some point I was fired, and I think I had the job for maybe a month. But I will say this, I was making $2 an hour, and this was 1981. So even by 1981 standards, that wasn't all that great. And it was like a late at night job, so I didn't like it anyway. But that was my first experience with being fired. I've had a few since then. But the main job I had through high school, I worked at a gas station because my dad knew the owner, and I got the job when I was 16. When I got my paper route job, my mother had to lie about my age because you couldn't get a paper route before you were 12, and I was only 11 when I picked up the route. But the gas station paid $3.35 an hour, and that was big doings back then. That was minimum wage, was $3.35. And I pumped gas, and there was a convenience store, and we changed tires on rims for people and checked oil. That was back when full service was still full service. Now people don't want to talk to anybody, so they just pull up to the self-serve pump. James, I'm sure if you had your druthers, you would push a button and the pump would like work itself into your car, so you wouldn't even have to open the door and stand there in the elements. But that was at gas station, and then I graduated high school, and when I went to college, I had a bunch of money saved up from all those jobs, and I didn't work again until I got kicked out of college, and then I had to figure out how to pay gas money going back and forth to college. And then I got a job in a restaurant. But what say you? What did you have going on in your youth?
I have so many thoughts and comments I want to make on what you did. I mean, you know what? I don't write anything down, so I don't know how to be able to keep track of all the insults I have piled up. But first of all, I take great pride in pumping my own gas because there's like one or two states where you're not allowed to. And those people freak out. They ask like it's some complicated procedure they can't do it. I'm so bad at doing everything with my hands. But if there's one thing I can do better than 1/50th of the states, it's pump my own gas.
Hold on, it's 1/25th. It's Oregon and New Jersey.
Both of them. That is such a scam. You're not allowed to pump your own gas. You have to like stand there and wait for somebody to come out. It's just that it's the dumbest thing. But besides, and you know the weirdest thing is if you like get into forum arguments about that, which you know is super fun to do when you have the moral high ground, is people defend it. There are people there who do not want to be allowed to pump their own gas. Like, and it's like, why would you not want to pump your gas? It's like, well, I don't want to smell like gas. And it's like, you think you just spray it all over yourself? Which, for the record, I did do one time. You know how there's that clip, you clip it and it just keeps pumping? Well, one time I forget what happened, but it didn't unclip when it filled up. It made a sound like it had unclipped and it was done. And I pulled it out and it was still going. And it doused the bottom of my pants and my shoes. And man, you know how, I mean, occasionally you get a drop of gas on something on your hands and you'll smell a little bit like it. If you douse your leg in gas, that is you got to drive with the windows open after that. That was an interesting experience. But I don't know if we've had this conversation before. We had to have. I actually was also a grade school janitor. It was not my first job, though.
We have not had this conversation.
Yeah, I did not get fired because I'm a better person than you. But on that topic, like, okay, so I know how grade schools work and like teacher lounge and stuff. So if there's a cake in there and it's been out for a while, it's getting to day-old, 2-day-old status. Like, first of all, you got to be sly with taking it. You just don't take everything. If there's 10 donuts left, you don't eat all 10. If there's half a cake left, you don't eat the whole cake. You eat a little bit so they can't identify, that it disappeared overnight. And if you're going to throw it out anyway, that's when you eat the whole thing. And if they ask you what happened to it, you say, well, I threw it out. If you want to keep old food here, you got to tell me. Like, this was totally preventable.
I thought it was a gift. Like when you tip the maid at a hotel, like, here's a little something for the janitor, little, for all your hard work.
Well, that's the thing. Like, in my family, we get stuff all the time. Like there's like sell-by dates on food that really don't mean anything because it's all packaged and stuff. So there were like vending machine refillers who would have all this product they couldn't do anything with.
Yeah.
And we would often be the beneficiary of that. You just get boxes of stuff. It was awesome. It was like Christmas. But you gotta put that in the same category. Like the janitor, if you got food that's gonna get old anyway, like, yeah, that's fair game for the janitorial staff. Absolutely. And the fact that you transgressed so far to lose that sacred privilege, like, I'm upset on behalf of all janitor kind. You gave us a bad name. This is shame on you, Steve. Shame. But
I thought it was $2 plus all the goodies you could pound down in a 3-hour shift.
And on the idea of gas stations, so I was briefly a night cops reporter in my brief foray into journalism, and it was a train wreck. But one thing after I doing that, I decided is that I will never ever, no matter how hard life is, I will never work at a gas station. I will never let my children or anyone I love work at a gas station, because those things get robbed all the time. And that's why they have to drop like every $50. I mean, they never have any money in the cash register, so you have to drop because they get robbed just so frequently. It's like going to an ATM, but it's illegal. It's just like, you hold up, you pretend you have a gun, and they hand it to you. But sometimes they really do have a gun, and they're stupid, and they shoot you for no reason. But yet somehow, like, the gas stations don't all have bulletproof glass. That was one of the biggest shocks coming from Illinois, where I was in a little bit of a rougher part, to Indiana. Like, in Illinois, every bank teller everywhere behind bulletproof glass. Like, no chances taken. You come...
Where were you in Illinois?
I was in the rough part, I just said. But if you go over here to...
So Illinois has a rough part?
I grew up there, my friend. And you can tell because all the tellers are behind bulletproof glass. You came to Indiana.
Okay. I can also tell I have overstepped a bound by asking you that question. So I withdraw. I would like the jury to strike that from the record, please.
You want me to give you my exact GPS coordinates for where I grew up so we can dox my parents?
If you were in East St. Louis or if you were in...
I was in central-ish Illinois, but there are parts where, you get to bigger cities, they get bad parts. And anyway, when the bad part's big enough, then you just put bulletproof glass everywhere. But I think even in towns that aren't so bad, in Illinois, everybody has bulletproof glass. You come to Indiana, nobody's behind bulletproof glass. Bank tellers aren't behind bulletproof glass. Gas station attendants aren't, except if you go into really bad parts of Indianapolis. Every once in a while, you'll find it. And if you
I'll bet up in Gary they've got a couple of bulletproof panes also.
If you end up in a part of Indiana where they actually do have bulletproof glass, you need to get out of there, because they probably had so many tellers shot in a row. They're like, it's going to be more cost effective to put up this bulletproof glass than to
we have to keep training these people.
For minimum wage, their lives are worth so little to these corporations. I just can't imagine for $7 an hour to give myself a 50% chance on any given night of getting held up. It was I remember there was one time, I think, I might be making this up, but I'm pretty sure this is a real story. There was a guy in a wheelchair who robbed one of these gas stations. It's just the easiest thing in the world. One time there was an inside job where instead of $50, the person got $3,000, which should be impossible in a gas station scenario. But they had teamed up, they robbed their own girlfriend, and she was in on it because, they forgot the gas stations have cameras. Because again, they won't protect you with bulletproof glass, but they'll put up a camera so they can have a grainy image of the person who walked in. And it's always like looking at Bigfoot. If these things are getting robbed all the time, I have an amazing camera just on my phone alone. You put up this security camera to protect somebody's life, at least make it so you can tell who it is, but they never do. Oh, yeah. But they could clearly tell when he went in to rob that the person just politely stepped aside and let him get it. There was no threat or anything. They clearly recognized each other. Not world-class criminals. So anyway, gas station, bad job. But then the other remarkable thing is I was thinking my first job was at a burger joint until you said the newspaper route. And I forgot about that. I did the newspaper route thing too. Ooh. And there are two kinds of routes, and they transitioned away from the one that you had. I think you were back in the collections era where the person who delivered paper,
I had to go door to door every week. Yeah.
And I had a friend who had to do that too, but by the time I got my route, I did not have to deal with the money. They did that all through the subscriptions people at the paper.
Oh,
so I just delivered. And really, I think technically my mom was the one who was on the paper route, because when we were at school, she would still do it. And I would just do it on weekends during the summer and stuff. I'd do it with her.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, she had 95 kids, just whatever part-time work she could get, fit in between there. So yeah, I remember that. I remember the Sunday papers weighed more than I did. I remember did you get chased by dogs on the paper route?
I was bit 3 times.
Wow, and you kept going.
I had the route a little over 2 years, and I got bit by 3 dogs. One was pretty bad. I almost had to go to the hospital for that one.
But you just walked it off. You had a dog bite and you walked it off.
Well, the person was so scared that I was going to sue them. Like, this was before people got sued.
Oh.
That's how bad it was. And I remember they brought me into their house, and it was up over my thigh, so I had to take my pants down to look at it. So they were trying to figure out, do I stand here while this kid is disrobing to look at how bad the bite is? It was a whole bad thing. It was a German Shepherd, the
So,
bastard. Anyway,
wow, you totally misplayed that. So if you had gone to the doctor, my understanding is they would have killed the dog and cut open the brain to make sure it didn't have rabies, or else you have to get 50s rabies
was a
shots
house
as
pet.
a preventative measure. But yeah, they definitely owed you some money for that. I had one time, there was this stupid boxer that would jump up and like bark at the door every time I went up there. It would scare me to death. Like, it's kind of like a jack in the box. You crank and crank and you know what's going to happen, but you don't know the exact moment, except this jack in the box had teeth and was faster than me. And I went up to the door, and one day it slammed against that door, and the door wasn't latched, and it came tearing out after me. And I turned to run, and I'm a runner. Like, this should have been my survival skill, but I was laden with papers, and I turned around to look, which was very stupid, and I tripped, and I just fell and put up my hands to protect myself, and the owner came out and grabbed him just in the nick of time. But even the proximity of almost getting bitten like traumatized me. And you got bit 3 times, and you kept going for a job that barely paid any money, which is probably why going to a gas station where you get shot at any moment didn't seem like a big deal to you. You clearly don't value your own survival.
James, I live next to a cornfield. Like, nobody ever got robbed of anything in my town. Nobody locked their doors. Like, we would keep the car keys in the visor of the car. Like, it was, there wasn't a whole lot going on where I grew up. So, and the gas station was only open like 6 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m. Like, it was, nothing was 24 hours back then.
Well, I guess if you had gone to a real gas station, you wouldn't be here today, and I don't know how to feel about that. If I'd be relieved or disappointed, we'll just leave that one ambivalent. But my first, like, I guess, job that was more substantial than newspapers, it was before, because the janitor work was a step up. Have you ever worked in fast food? Because fast food was my low point.
No, I've worked in a sit-down mom-and-pop restaurant, but never fast food.
So it was fast food, but it wasn't like a fast food chain. It was not McDonald's, but it was like a family-owned version of McDonald's. And it was pretty intense. Like, looking back, the problem was me. You don't realize how much pressure there is to get people's order to them quickly, especially, when they'll be upset if you give them the wrong thing. You're taking in money.
And correctly,
yeah,
yes,
and giving out food and all of that. Like, I have never, even working at the newspaper was substantially less stressful than working in fast food. And then you have to, at the end of the night, you got to cover everything in bleach, and you touch it, you end up ruining all your clothes. That was how I did learn, though. I do have some physical limits. Like, I used to just kind of be a bottomless pit for food and drink and everything else. And they had these 64-ounce cups. And one night I took that 64-ounce cup home at like 9 p.m. and drank the whole thing. And I could not fall asleep, and I could not understand why. It mystified me. Apparently there's a point, even when you're 16, you can consume so much caffeine you can't actually fall asleep. Those burgers, though, were delicious. They used real ground beef, like they ground it right there in front of us, and I have not been back there since, and I probably should. That's one of the few things I can still eat. I can go get the patties.
Does the place still exist?
Yeah, they're still going, and they're, again, I did not get along there. I was very bad at it, but the people there were good people, and they make good burgers. It's kind of a local institution out there. So yeah,
this was like early 2000s, wasn't it?
Well, I was born in 85, so I would have been 16 in 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. But it would have been the summer. Yeah, it would have probably been the summer I turned 16. So it would have been right in there, right before September 11th. Back when the world was more innocent.
Yeah. Do you remember what you earned at that job?
It was minimum wage, I think, and I only got the job because it was owned by a family friend. And there are more details to it that make this story more fun, but I can't give them out without identifying the place. And that would be the worst thing, like to go and fail at this restaurant job, and then years later accidentally call them out and get them online hate. It's like I was the worst thing that ever happened to them.
Well, you also spoke very highly of their burgers, so there's
Their
that.
burgers were great, and I'm sure working there is better than actually working at McDonald's or someplace else that's officially corporate or all those. For the record, I actually love McDonald's. I just do not want to work there. I've known quite a few people who have worked there, and I think in terms of like pressure for minimum wage jobs, I think McDonald's is about as high as you can get. You got to go fast, 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 and people really just feel like they can treat you terrible if you're there. I don't understand the psyche of somebody like a grown adult who just goes and like screams at a 16 or 17-year-old for screwing up a $1.29 sandwich.
I know.
But those people exist. They
I agree.
absolutely exist, and they are terrifying.
And I can't imagine what it's like to live with those people. Back in my day, James, and this may blow your mind, but McDonald's used to. Now there's more pressure because everything is made on the spot. When I was a kid, everything would get sort of stockpiled. Like there would be a mountain of wrapped cheeseburgers under a warmer, and Big Macs and ham. Like they would just grab one and put it on the tray. Like the food was already prepared, so you just had to sort of keep restocking. But when you worked in the restaurant, the best thing for me about working in a restaurant was eating mistakes.
Ooh.
Like if somebody sent something back because it wasn't right, or the cooks made it and they screwed something up about it, like it would come back and we would devour it whole.
Holy cow.
I would imagine at McDonald's, you never get sick of filet of fish or Big Mac. Like everything that is just outside whatever time frame it is before you got to throw them out. Although nowadays you don't make it ahead of time. 2001, you probably weren't making it but when it was ordered, so you didn't get any mistakes back.
Well, that was the whole appeal, not being McDonald's. I mean, everything was fresh, and these were pretty substantial burger patties. Making myself hungry now. But I remember when McDonald's made that transition, because of all things, I had it was like a jobs program in 8th grade or something like that. They took a couple students and we go out to the community college, and every day we'd tour a different like business. Like one of the ones I went and toured was the newspaper. I thought, this is awful. I never want to work in a place like this. And a few years later, I picked that as my career. I should have listened to my gut, my first instinct, and just stayed away. But one of the places
13-year-old James looking like Nostradamus.
But there was one of the places was a McDonald's, because they were like, there was a franchisee there who had a bunch of them. They were a local power broker, and they did lots of charitable stuff. So we went around, and like their PR person or somebody showed us, and they were just then transitioning to making everything as you order. And they said if you order every day, you notice a difference, because it used to be like 10 seconds and you would get your order. They would just hand it to you unless it was something custom.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden it took, a couple minutes, which is just outrageous for people. I will say that actually McDonald's beef, it gets a bad rap, but as somebody who takes his meat very seriously, they probably have, of all the fast food places, the best meat if you just want to eat the meat, because they don't add any oils or anything. It's just the beef cooked in its own juices. So if you were to go to McDonald's and order nothing but like quarter-pound patties, super healthy. But if you eat all the stuff with it, not so much.
Yeah, and they have such strict requirements of purity or goodness or whatever the FDA puts them through. Fast food places are actually very safe places to eat,
Yes.
other than the Jack in the Box in Seattle where everybody got E. coli for a while. That might be before your time. You might have actually been a journalist during that time.
I don't know. There's always someplace giving people E.
maybe that
coli.
was-
I mean, grocery stores have recalls. For a while, ice cream was killing people. Like you know what? You never hear about these things in time. Like by the time they catch them, the outbreak is already over. Like, by the way, you might already have E. coli.
Yes.
There was
Well, just doing this show with you every week almost convinces me I have to have had E. coli at some point.
we had one local restaurant that got shut down by the health department. You ever have that where you are?
Not that I can think of. Probably a couple food
Yeah, there
trucks.
was one. It had been open for a few years in the mall, and they had like a list of health code regulation violations, like as long as your arm, and they were closed for like 3 days, and then they reopened. It's like, how does any restaurant survive that? It's like, well, this place was just shut down for health code violations, but they were closed for 3 days. I'm sure it's good. And that place, that stayed open for years afterwards, which just shocks me, because restaurants go out of business all the time for all sorts of reasons. Like, I used to think it'd be cool to own like a bar, but a bar, a restaurant, anything, I mean, you just burn through money. It's so hard to set yourself off apart from everybody else, and you get like a few bad months and you're gone. I would rather set my money on fire than own a restaurant, I think. I think burning the money, just literally burning it, would be a smarter investment. At least that way you get warmth.
Wow. Well, that's a cheery note to end on, James.
Do you, or
Holy
can
cow.
you make it work in the restaurant? Is that this thing? Everybody thinks they can own a bar or a restaurant. Everybody thinks they can, and it's like the hardest business to run, and it's the hardest place to make money. This is a cautionary.
Almost 100% go out of business in the first few years. The build out is stupidly expensive. And unless you have some kind of catch it on the upswing niche, it's just, you can't compete these days. So many chains suck all the business
Especially
away.
not if you hire people like me or you. Then you're just done for.
I'll have you know I showed up almost all the time.
It's better than I expected.
Oh, James, you and my wife, you're such goody two-shoes, all of you. You got to live a little, my friend. All right, well, speaking of living a little, we're going to let you go so that you can live a little bit of your life outside of this show. I don't know why you wasted in the show in the first place, but we're glad you do every week, and I'm talking to both of you. Until next week, where we cover another scintillating topic that's going to marginally keep me awake, and James is going to talk ad nauseum about. This is Steve Olivas, Dr. Steve for James the Exploding Unicorn Breakwell, saying thanks for listening, thanks for watching. Smash that follow button, man, so that you are subscribed and get all of the updates and automatic downloads. It probably won't help in the long run, but we'll like you for it anyway. Two wrongs can make a right. See you next week.